Hello, everyone. You are listening to WKNC 88.1 FM HD1 Raleigh. We are a student run organization over here at NC State. I am Kevelle Wilson, and this is Off the Record. Okay. Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with David Cook, who is a rock singer songwriter performing at Packapalooza in a few days. Thank you for coming to interview with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay. So, first of all, I'm going to take it back just a few years.
Okay.
You made a band in high school called Axiom.
Just a few years. Okay. Yeah.
Um, what did you learn from your first band that you carried on into your later career endeavors?
Um, Really just that I think the big lesson I took from that band was that you can't really hide on a stage, which, why would you want to hide if you're getting on a stage? But uh yeah, just to, if I can't go on stage and believe in what I'm doing, then it's pretty hard to expect anybody else to do that in the audience. So that is certainly a lesson I've had to relearn over and over again.
Mm. So, kind of getting over that fear of being on stage. How did you do that?
I got over stage fright just from repetition. I think I still get. I had this conversation the other day with somebody. Uh, I get antsy. I sort of get
Mhm.
like the butterflies in the stomach. But I don't know if it's nerves exactly now. Like I feel confident in what I'm doing or what I'm getting ready to do. But there's always the that anxiety about the unknown. Like if something outside of your control goes wrong, like a drum cymbal falls over or
Mhm.
a mic stops working or whatever. Those things that can really abrupt you, shake you out of the pocket, and then you kind of got to scramble to keep the show,
Mhm.
keep the show's forward momentum, I guess. Um, yeah, there's nothing that makes me more uncomfortable than to watch a performer or a band find themselves in that position and not be able to navigate it successfully. So that's probably like, I guess I just told you what my biggest fear was. But yeah, that.
Okay. Speaking of being nervous, you
Mhm.
must have been very nervous doing American Idol. Um, I'm assuming a lot of our listeners have watched the show and love it, and I do as well.
Thank you.
Can you kinda talk about the background experience of, like, getting on the show and going through those kind of steps before you even, like, touch the stage and get on TV all the way to winning?
Sure. So I had not in, no, I had no intention of auditioning when I went to Omaha for the auditions. My little brother Andrew had wanted to audition for a while, and I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Um, kind of doing some solo stuff, playing in a different band, bartending, and yeah, it's just sort of happened. Like I got talked into it while we were standing in line to register. I didn't really have any time to overthink it, which I'm pretty good at doing. Um, and yeah, it just sort of snowballed. And it really wasn't until what uh, I forget what they call it now, but at the time they called it Green Mile, where it's like you've gone through Hollywood Week, you've made it to the
Mhm,
top, whatever's left, and then they're out of that group. They're going to pick the top 20 or 24 to go on the show. So that was probably the first time when it was just like, oh, this is real. Okay. And then I think by that point, like you kind of have to compartmentalize your anxiety,
mhm,
which is not always the healthiest thing to do, but um, yeah, it was just like, okay, well, I can't bail on it now. So
mhm,
I kind of have to just ride the anxiety out and
mhm,
whatever happens, happens. So, um, yeah, I think it was just, I was really fortunate though. I had some experience, kind of what we talked about earlier with bands and stuff before this to where I
mhm,
kind of knew where I sat, um, on the musical spectrum. So I don't feel like I lacked the knowledge of myself to where like I would have misrepresented what I wanted to do post Idol.
mhm,
So I was thankful for that, and I just sort of kind of leaned on that as best I could and held on for dear life.
Nice. Um, so I kind of wanted to talk about your latest single, um, "TABOS," which I
Mhm.
find really interesting.
Thank you.
Um, I just really like the kind of soundscape of that song. I think the cover matches it really well.
Thank you.
When you kinda go into creating a theme or a motif for a song, especially if it's not going to be an album, kind of its own, like, solo thing, what kinda your goal there?
Um, I went to college and got a graphic design degree, so I do tend to think of songs in a visual medium a little bit, and so I think anybody that like parses my lyrics, like I use a lot of imagery, um, and so I sort of had kind of a rough idea in my head of like what I wanted the cover to convey. The song itself is just talking about like I'd watched this sort of actors roundtable interview,
Mm,
uh, and Tom Hanks was one of the actors on it, and he had talked about this lesson that he had learned about you know about how to just not live on the extremes of like emotion and if something great's happening, just wait a minute. If something terrible is happening, just wait a minute. Um, and so TABO stands for "This will all be over soon." And for me, what that song represents is just this idea, like, everything is going to be okay. Just like ride the wave out as best you can, and or the inverse is like, everything feels really good right now.
mm.
So try not to get too up because it'll all be over soon. Um, but then when I finished the song, it kind of felt the music sort of conveyed this like uh, isolation sort of vibe to me, and
Mhm,
and then I came across that image of like an astronaut standing in the middle of a
mhm,
space rock somewhere, just all alone, and the image sort of like really drove the point home for me of like that isolation, and yeah, so just it felt like the perfect image for this.
Yeah, I kinda wanna ask more about what you talked about, kind of the highs and lows. I feel like that's very common in the music career, people having hits,
Yeah,
and then maybe something else happens and they're not as popular as they used to be, then they go back to having another hit.
sure.
How do you kind of, like, manage your kind of, like, expectations of, like, your career?
Um, I mean, my expectations have never really shifted, to be completely
Mhm,
truthful. I mean, um, I think you can have like an individual goal, maybe change, but I think the consistent through line for me has always just been I want to put out stuff that I'm proud of, and I want to enjoy this process, and I want to enjoy the aspects of this job, like, because they're not for everybody. The
mhm,
idea of going on the road for a long time, and particularly now, it was easier to like say yes to going on the road for a year when I was single and
mhm,
25, and now at 40, and I'm married and have kind of a setup here at home, and it's a little harder to leave. So
mhm.
uh, it's yeah, you got to really love this gig. I think first and foremost. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it's yeah. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I can go off on a tangent on that one.
No, it does. I think a lot of people just kind of glamorize what it's like to be a musician and only see the highs of it.
Listen, this gig is better than most. I
Mhm.
don't want to sound jaded or bitchy or anything like that. It's yeah. I mean, any job you have, there's going to be things about it you don't like.
Mhm,
I I have slept on more uncomfortable surfaces than like I'm somebody who enjoys his sleep. In fact, we did a little weekend run last weekend, and I ended up having to sleep on like a van bench.
mhm,
It's like it's fine if you're in your 20s and you can recover pretty quickly, and then all of a sudden it's like
mhm.
get a little older, your back starts to hurt all the time.
Um, I kind of also wanted to ask about one of my favorite songs of yours, "Red Turns Blue."
Yeah.
Um, so you've talked about in the past how it's kind of about anxiety, and I know you've been diagnosed semi recently with anxiety disorder.
Yes.
I am at I think a lot of musicians are starting to talk about and open up about their mental health struggles. Why do you think that's so important within the music industry?
I think, I mean, listen, sunlight is the best disinfectant in general. So
Mm,
um, I, I'm I, I'm thankful for the people who came before me that felt open enough to talk about it because it opened that door a little bit more to where I felt
mm,
comfortable walking through it. Um, but it's yeah, I think back like even at like 25 when I was on Idol and the level of access to the rest of the world that you had at that point, like you know, was daunting. And then you think about it now, and I mean, you know, it's kind of hard to turn the world off sometimes. And I think there's a healthy
mhm,
aspect to being able to kind of, okay, I'm home now and I'm not around X, Y, or Z, and I can sort of turn it all off. And I don't know that that exists fully anymore. Um, and for all the great things that come with being able to um, uh, connect and exist in a communal space with people all over the world, all at once. Um, there are definitive downsides, and so
mm,
um, you know, my anxiety sort of stemmed from the fact that all of a sudden it was, you know, after 25 years of being taught and raised to live life a certain way, and this is what the world will be for you, and then you know, by a sheer stroke of luck, I was also then forced to kind of rewire on the fly. And it's not the easiest transition in the world. I still struggle with it sometimes, like the idea, like you know, people having an opinion about the color of my hair or the length of my
mhm,
beard or whatever. Um, so yeah, I think it just got to the point where I felt like, all right, if I'm gonna keep doing this, if I'm gonna keep being a musician and keep performing, I kind of have to uh, take some of the onion layers away and be a little bit more vulnerable. And so that was sort of the crux for putting that song out. And the response was heartening. I was a little nervous. I was more a little more nervous for that song release
mm.
than any other one that I can recall.
Yeah, I think it was a great thing because I remember you talking about how progressing as a musician is so key into enjoying what you do. And
Yeah,
you said, I'm pretty sure you said you would stop making music if one of your albums sounded exactly like your last one. Yeah.
and that's still true. That's still true. You know, I think any musician would tell you that. I truly believe that
Mm,
because it's part of the joy of this gig is the creation aspect. It's like I get to put something out in the world that didn't exist prior,
mhm,
and and I get to let that hopefully be, you know, my legacy, and so much that I care about a legacy. So um, yeah, I just and then I listen back to songs that I did like when I was a teenager, and it's like, God, that's not great, you know. But then at the time, when you're putting that stuff out, you're like, oh, this is, oh,
Yeah.
I love this song. This is so indicative of who I am and what I stand for. And I think it's fun to go back and look at that stuff and find, like, find those narratives and how they've progressed and how they've changed. And
Mm,
uh, yeah, I feel like if I started just kind of living in this lane, you know, forever as a creative person, I don't think I'd find any joy in it, to be completely honest.
mhm. So how do you kind of push your artistic palette to be able to create new things? Like, what do you how do you kind of refuel your creative bucket?
I think honestly, as I get older, um, some of those things just happen naturally. Um, I think with time, you become a little less rigid in your opinions. You
Mhm,
know, there's music I listen to now that I know I would never have admitted to at 25 or 20.
mhm,
Certainly wouldn't have given it the option. Like I wouldn't have given myself the option. And so as I've gotten older, I've kind of just gotten over myself and gotten out of the way and allowed my peripherals to open up, and it opens you up to more influences, more inspiration, and so that's kind of really been the way I've attacked sort of like expanding my palette, to use your phrase, which I like, by the way.
Mhm,
It's acknowledging that, like, okay, I might exist here, but that doesn't mean that something way over here or something way over here can't influence this and maybe send it in a slightly different direction that
mhm.
that interests both me and hopefully the people listening to it.
Okay. Um, so when you perform, you will be at Packapalooza, and it will, of course, be a bunch of college students who have may or may not have heard of you.
Sure.
How do you kinda go into controlling a crowd and making sure that your audience engages with you?
Oh man, I mean that's the $1 million question. If I knew the answer to that, if I had the formula where I could do that 100% of the time, every time, like I'd I'd be way, way wealthier. No, it's about, my job as a performer is to create um, a cathartic experience that only, I mean, I say only us, but now with the advent of like live streams and stuff, that sort of opens it up a little bit.
Mm,
Um, but to just create, an energy and a vibe that people can tune into and hopefully walk away with something. So those have been my favorite concerts to attend as a listener, is when I feel like, oh, this experience is something that is happening in this room
mm,
tonight and then never again. Um, and so, yeah, that's always sort of the goal. I'm excited to come out there. It's been a minute since we've gotten to perform in Raleigh, and so to get to come back, and I've already been told not to wear any shade of blue, so
yeah,
I'm
don't
uh,
do that.
I'm going to avoid that. And then somebody was telling me about, oh God, I forget the name of it now, but like there's like a milk processing plant, like the ice cream thing. What's the ice cream thing?
Howling Cow.
I've been told I have to do that. So
It is, it's really good.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in. I mean, I'm wearing black to kind of because it's slimming, but I'm not a stranger to ice cream. Let's just be honest. So
Um, so you kinda talked before how you kinda look back on past songs
mhm.
and kind of wonder where your head was at the time. I kinda so kind of
I
performing
asked
old
myself that question that exact way, but not as nicely as you just put it.
So when you perform older songs that are, what, 15 years old,
Hmm.
what's kinda your mental? Is it like you're just going through the motions, or can you still find something to love about music that you wrote that long ago?
I mean, it sort of just goes back to what my job is. Like my
Mm,
job when I'm writing songs is to write songs. My job when I'm performing songs is to perform songs. So um, they're different exercises. They're different.
mhm,
You're using different muscles. Uh, so when I'm performing, and this is a lesson I actually picked up on Idol, is my job is to tell the story of that song and to emote whatever that song is trying to emote. So it's if I'm singing a sad song, my job's not to dance around. Do you know what I mean? Uh, so, well, no, it's not. So my focus when we're doing the shows is to really try to tune into what the song and the lyrics are trying to say and to emote those accurately, as accurately as I can. Um, and so in that way, it's sort of like, I don't want to say acting because that almost implies that it's insincere, because it does all come from a very sincere place. Um, but you are sort of embodying the character of that song, if that makes any sense. So, which is not something I necessarily am wrapping my head around in the writing process.
mhm. So, keeping that in mind, how do you kinda come up with a set list?
Um, I mean, that's a good question because there's always, every show can be a little different, and so in that way, it's this balancing act of like, catering the set list to whatever vibe you think you're walking into,
Mhm.
um, but also not doing that to such a degree that you're just sort of pandering to the audience, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, we try to keep an honest balance of energy and tempo, and then finding those little moments in the set list where you can throw in maybe something a little slower or just a different
Mhm.
vibe. Um, I guess the easy way to say that would be like, try to find spots for ballads. Um, but yeah, I want our shows to be fun. I don't want them to feel like an hour and a half of sad power ballads. You know what I mean?
To be
That
able to
doesn't
enjoy.
sound fun for anybody.
So you've been all around the world, during your tours. What has been your favorite venue that you performed at for the years?
Um, Great question. Uh, I did get to perform at Carnegie Hall.
Oh, okay.
I got to perform as a surprise guest for then, I want to say then she was Secretary of State, Clinton, Hillary Clinton.
Oh, okay.
She was a big Idol fan and voted for me,
Mhm.
so thanks, Hillary. Um, that was pretty rad. I got to do a show with my Idol mate David Archuleta. We performed in the Philippines to 115,000 people.
Mm.
And then my next show was in like Ohio a week later for like 800. uh, and then more recently, Chris Allen, the guy who won the season after mine, we went and did a 2.5 week like acoustic tour around Europe.
Mhm.
That was a blast. I had like 3 days off in London, and you know got to I got to eat a Scotch egg for the first. I understand that none of this is really in reference to your question. I'm bragging that I got to eat a Scotch egg, which nobody's ever
No,
had.
go ahead. That sounds like a crazy
It,
brag.
it's weird to brag about having eaten like British food, but it was really good.
Um, so kind of what you talked about, you going from, a huge stadium to a smaller venue. Do you have a preference for which one you'd rather perform at?
Man, this is going to sound like riding the fence. There are pros and cons to both. There really are.
Mhm.
I think it's easier. Um, it's easier to find a pocket with a larger crowd, but harder to connect with a
Mm.
larger crowd. Yeah, I think that's probably the most concise way I can put it. Like you get in a room with 800 people, 500 people, whatever the number is.
Mhm.
It's easier to, I guess, to feel like once you've found the pocket, which takes a little longer, it's easier to kind of find a way to make those individual connections throughout the audience. And um, yeah. Now, if I had Taylor Swift's budget and Taylor Swift show production, that's a whole different ballgame. But yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I think I kinda relate to that 'cause, whenever I want to see an artist who is really huge and is showing at an arena, I kinda pause and, like, feel like staring at them when they're so far away that they're literally an ant. Like, is it even worth going at that point?
Right? Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's artists that have and production staffs that have figured out ways around that.
Mhm.
I think Pink is really good at that.
Mm.
She's figured out a way through, and primarily through the flying through the air stuff. Which Godspeed to her. I'm not doing it anytime soon. Uh, I feel like that helps. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not a static like here's the stage,
Yeah.
there's where they'll be, and everybody else is kind of wherever else. She almost kind of brings the show to you that way, which is
Mhm.
interesting and really cool. So, um, yeah, I'm gonna stop promoting other artist shows now. Oh God.
So you've been in the music industry for a while now, and I'm sure you've met plenty of people. Do you have any meetings that still kind of like you kind of fangirl when you kind of think about looking back at it?
I love that I just said I was going to not promote other people's shows, and then that was the next question. That's so good. Uh, no, I, I I got to meet Springsteen when he
Okay.
I forget how long ago it was, but it was when they were closing down the old Meadowlands in New York, and I got to go to one of those shows, and that was transcendent. That was incredible.
Mhm.
Past that, I still brag. Sometimes Adam Sandler said hi to me at the Teen Choice Awards in
Okay.
2008. Um, and then athletes, man. I'm a I'm a sports fan, so
Mhm.
I don't usually geek out with musicians and actors nearly as much as I do with athletes. Because yeah, I growing up, like all I wanted to do was be a baseball player. So um, instead, I get to do this, which isn't too bad.
Did you have a favorite team?
I'm a Royals fan.
Oh, okay,
Just a
okay.
little. I worked for the Royals when I was in high school and college. So,
Oh, wow, okay.
could you try again? Oh, sorry about that. Siri was
Yeah, you're
listening.
good.
Um, yeah, yeah, Royals and Chiefs and Boston Celtics, and I've recently just randomly picked a hockey team. I'm a Seattle Kraken guy, so I know none of those are Carolina-based teams.
No, no, you're good. No
Okay,
obligation to
good.
answer one of them. Um,
But I
so
will
after
say, and this is not at all pandering; it is entirely pandering. If it's not Mizzou, which I root for Mizzou, I
okay.
NC State's my number two.
Okay. Top 3,
You
that's good
can't
enough.
you can't prove I'm lying about that. So I'm
Yeah.
feeling.
Um, so after a long practice or a performance and you're starving after, what was kind of like a go-to restaurant food for you?
See, now you're just gonna get me in trouble. Uh, okay, so if I'm eating after a show, which isn't a given,
Mhm.
I do like a good Waffle House. I do.
Okay, I agree with that.
Yeah. Um, if not that, there is and I don't know if they're that far east because they just came here to Nashville. There's a kind of a regional gas station chain called Quick Trip. If you're not familiar
Oh,
with
yeah.
Quick Trip,
Mhm.
like what's the is? Do you guys have Wawas or Sheets
We
in
have
Raleigh?
sheets.
Okay, so Quick Trip is like Sheets, but more like Midwest region.
Okay, okay.
Um, I'll make a good Quick Trip run, or Sheets or Wawas for that matter.
Mhm.
They're all pretty good. But I'm not like rocking like a filet mignon at 4 in the morning.
Um, so you've been under a label and also been independent.
Mhm.
Um, what are kind of the pros and cons of those 2?
I mean, it's resources versus creative freedom, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. I really enjoy having creative freedom. I really do. That was always really really important to me, and
Mhm.
um, but there was certainly more resources. So it's a give and a take for any artist, and I think now uh, it's easier for somebody to listen to your music and harder to be heard. I think
I agree.
that's to me sort of like you know a label can help you be easier to be listened to, but it ultimately becomes harder to be heard. Um, uh, and as an independent musician, I feel like you can kind of dictate that a little bit more, but at the cost of you know having that platform underneath to kind of push your stuff out to
Mhm.
more listeners. So Um, yeah,
Yeah, I
I
think
don't.
you kind of brought
I don't know. I was just saying I don't know that one's better than the other.
it. Yeah, I didn't want you to pick or choose one. I was just curious
Thank you.
what you think.
Thank you so much.
Um, I think that's also why labels are kind of finding themselves in a weird spot right now because artists who are really underground aren't big enough to have a label behind them, and label wouldn't get behind them because they're too small. But once they have that hit through social media, TikTok, Instagram, whatever it is, then they don't really need a label to get recognition anymore because they gotten that on their own. So
It's
it's kind of like,
I don't know that the labels are as much of a gatekeeper as they used to be, and I don't mean that term
mm,
derogatorily or um, yeah, I think to your point, it's you can navigate this for yourself way easier than you used to. It's a lot of
mhm,
work, and ultimately, it's what balance do you want to have for yourself for like the business versus the creative.
mm,
Um, because the more you take on yourself from the business side, of course, that means less time to devote to the creative, and ultimately, it's which it's a chicken or the egg thing at that point, like which comes first.
mm.
So, yeah, I think there's more of an avenue to do it yourself. It's just a matter of what your preference is and what works best for you and your business, I guess.
Yeah, I kinda wanted to ask about how you go about balancing your life between your music and your other daily responsibilities. You kinda have a schedule you set for yourself to work on music, like, "This is what I'm doing today," or
That would be way smarter. It's it's a constant give and take. I'll go through periods where, like this month, I've been really busy, and my schedule the second half of this year is way busier than the first half was.
Mm,
Uh, but the first half was more like getting all my ducks in a row to do the second half of the year, as well as being more present here at home, and so like leave tomorrow for Raleigh, but today I went to Home Depot
mhm.
and had to buy a new thermostat for our attic. So yeah, whether or not I try to find the balance, I have figured out at this age that the balance just sort of finds me, whatever it's going to be.
Mm. Okay, so you, were raised in Blue Springs, Missouri,
Mhm.
and I'm assuming a lot of our listeners, including me, have never been there. Do
I don't know. It is a pretty big tourist mecca, so
Oh, okay, okay.
it's funny.
If you were to take us all on a tour, what are some stops that we need to go to kinda get the full experience?
You know what's funny? In 15 years, I have never been asked that question. I love that question. Things to do in Blue Springs. Um, all right. So here's what I'll try to take you through the day.
Okay.
Um, so we would start. There's a place in town called the Big Biscuit, and it's like a local regional chain kind of thing.
Mhm.
For breakfast. Um, Assuming sports are in season, like the schools are in session, all that stuff, and it's not the summer, probably go to some sort of Blue Springs South High School Jaguars sporting event.
Okay.
Um, that would be in the evening though, so I don't know what we would do during the day. Probably go back to sleep after breakfast. Uh, it's just what I used to do. Uh, Lunch, we'll hit some Quick Trip. Why
Mhm.
not?
Okay, okay.
Um, God, my brother and my mom still live in the Kansas City area, like not far from Blue
Mhm.
Springs, and they're gonna hate this list that I'm putting together. Um, and then let's see, what would we do for dinner in Blue Springs? Trying to think. There are man, are there any like no, Betty's is closed. So there was this place called Betty's Family Dining that when I was in
Mhm.
high school, we used to skip homeroom and go eat there during school. I think the statute of limitations has passed, so I think I'm good there.
Mhm.
But they're not open anymore. So man, probably we'd probably have to leave Blue Springs and like go into the city or something for dinner. Like go to like Jack Stack Barbecue or something.
Okay, that sounds pretty
Yeah.
good.
And then, maybe catch a Royals game or something.
Mm,
Actually, it'd be better to go to a Chiefs game. Like
okay, okay.
they're doing better. Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious. Do you kind of collect CDs or vinyls or anything like that?
I did for a little bit. I kind of my collector's bug sort of shifts every now and again. So like the last thing I really collected, I'm looking around down in our basement right now. Probably Lego kits.
Okay.
When we were tracking my record digital vein, we were doing it here at the house, and we'd go through periods where my producer Andy would need to like just do some busy work on the computer that I was didn't involve me having to be active in the room. So I would come out into the main area and just be like, I'm really bored. There's nothing to do, and he's got to listen to stuff, so I can't put the TV on. And
Hmm.
uh, so I bought like a little Lego kit, like a $60 thing, and put it together. And it's like, oh, I look like, oh, I burned like 30 minutes doing that. And so then it turned into like buying these giant kits. Like I've got the Roman Colosseum over here, and
Well, okay.
we working intermittently about 6 months. Like it's such a money and time suck, but it is fun if you enjoy like being able to just mindlessly do stuff. So, but hobbies now more than anything, that's probably it actually. Yeah, I think it's still Legos. So Lego, if you're listening, send me some free stuff.
We need a David Cook minifigure.
That's right. Make this happen. I'm in.
Uh-huh. Actually, I have a friend who's really into Lego sets, and uh,
I'll talk
yeah,
shop all day. I love it.
I was really into Legos as a kid, and I kind of dropped off for a
You know what's funny?
decade.
I hated them as a kid. Could not get into
Really?
them at all. It took me, yeah, my getting into my 30s to be like, all right, I'm in now. Jesus, that's funny.
um, so I know this is kind of an annoying question, but I have to ask.
Okay.
It's been 8 years since your last album. Are you anywhere near album mode?
So annoying. No, has it been 8 years since my last
It
full
has
length?
been 8 years.
I
2015.
Yeah, it's sort of trying to like I love making albums. I really do. It's
Mhm,
sort of trying to figure out what the best way to coexist with this current environment. I don't know that records um I do take a while between projects anyway, and so
mhm,
I think to really sit down and do a record would almost take too long now with the current like musical appetite. So
mhm.
I've really sort of leaned into the EPs and the digital singles and stuff like that, and um, I, d- I appreciate the parameters of it a little bit. It's like, all right, you're making like a mini record when you make an EP,
Mhm.
so you have to be a little more concise with your storytelling, which for me isn't the worst thing in the world because I could talk all day. So um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know when another full length is in the cards. I know I've got some stuff together right now that
Mhm.
um, as of now will probably exist as an EP. But if I start getting getting the inspiration at a pretty decent clip, that can turn into a full length in short order. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, I don't know if I'm not actively working on a full length record right now. That's the concise answer to your question.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
It's kinda interesting you brought up the musical landscape on why you don't think kind of LPs fit in that anymore. Do you think people's kind of attention spans are worsening, or do you think there's too much music coming out that you don't think making a whole album is worth it?
Um, I mean, listen, like it's it's not quite the revenue generator that it used to be. And it's
Mm,
still not cheap to make good sounding records. Um, So yeah, it becomes a bit of like, all right, is it worth it to drop, you know, 5, 6 figures on a promotional tool, which is effectively what
Mhm,
the record
mhm,
has become. Um, yeah, because people don't really, people don't really buy them. It's streaming, and streaming revenues kind of present their own particular set of problems.
mhm,
Um, but that's what the consumer has hung their hat on, and ultimately in this business, it is a consumer based industry. We are a service industry. So if that's how the audience is listening to music, then it is up to us to figure out how to get that to them, and you know hopefully make enough to where we can make a living at it and go out on the
mhm,
road and perform these songs for people. So um, yeah, I mean, I could, for lack of a better phrase, I could piss in the wind, and keep making records and go broke doing that. So
mhm,
yeah, I think it's more just you kind of gotta, you kind of have to navigate, the public's appetite for what you're doing, and figure out the best way to put it out there. So somebody's gonna figure it out and make $1 million. Or $1 billion. I haven't figured it out.
That is kinda interesting you were talking about you were able to kind of pack more punch into your songs, if you will,
Mhm,
in an EP because you have so much less time to
mhm.
get across what you want to. Um, so how does that kinda change how you kinda your approach to songwriting?
Um, it doesn't necessarily change my approach to songwriting. It does change my approach to putting songs on records or putting songs on EPs. Like, if you think about it with like a full length, you have your single or singles, hopefully,
Mhm,
and then you have like maybe your songs that like fans love, that aren't released as singles but are important parts of the record, and then you have like deep cuts.
mhm,
I don't know that the luxury of deep cuts exists much anymore. Uh,
okay.
so it's more about just being a little more aggressive in trimming the fat, I guess. I hate saying that because it dismisses some of my favorite songs are deep cuts, and
Mhm,
so calling them fat is like, I struggle with that. But I mean, ultimately, it's yeah, you kind of have to pass a higher bar, I think.
mhm,
And when you only have 5 or 6 spots on an EP, it's like, all right, well, I want these songs to be the best representation of what I'm doing creatively and where I'm at. And I love this song over here, but it doesn't really fit this. The good part about it is I'm accruing quite the catalog of B-sides. So maybe
mhm,
they'll find the light of day someday.
okay.
Yeah,
We're looking forward to that. So that was my last official question for you.
it's great.
Um, is there anything else you wanted to talk about that I didn't, have a question about?
Um, Man, just I'm excited to come out there and play. I've been on, other than being warned about the not wearing blue, which is fine. I've been told nothing but good things about this event and Raleigh, and so yeah, I hope people come out. I'm excited to perform for everybody.
Sounds good. Do you mind letting our listeners know, where they can find you on social media?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter or X or whatever it's called at the David Cook. I am on Instagram, David Cook Official, as well as on Threads, David Cook Official. You can find me on Facebook or Meta or whatever that's called now. At I believe it's just David Cook, or maybe it's David Cook Official. I should know that, and I don't. Or you can find all that information out at davidcookofficial.com. See, I know that.
Sounds good. Everyone over here at NC State, if you have the chance, come out the 26th and go see them live. Great music. It's free. You have no reason not to go.
Exactly. You have no reason not to. So I love that. That's awesome.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to WKNC 88.1 FM HD1 Raleigh. We are a student-run organization over here at NC State. I am Kevelle Wilson, and this is Off the Record.